Have you ever considered how a decision made thousands of miles away could lead to a famine? It might seem like a stretch, but let's dive into the world of history where decisions of one man had far-reaching and devastating consequences. Let's talk about the power of decision-making. In our daily lives, we make countless decisions. Some are as simple as choosing what to wear, others are as complex as deciding on a career path. Now, multiply that scale of influence by 100, 1,000, even 1,000,000 times. This is the weight of decisions made by leaders, especially during times of war. Enter Winston Churchill, a man of great charisma, formidable intellect, and a key decision-maker during the tumultuous times of World War II. As the Prime Minister of Britain, Churchill was known for his defiant speeches and iron will. His decisions shaped the course of the war and left lasting impacts on the world. One of those decisions involved the diversion of food supplies. Picture this. It's the early 1940s, and World War II is in full swing. Supplies are critical. Churchill, in his strategic planning, makes a decision. He orders the diversion of food supplies from Bengal in India, a British colony at the time, to support the war efforts and feed soldiers in Europe. But this decision, made thousands of miles away in a war room in London, sets the stage for a catastrophe. Bengal, heavily reliant on its food supplies, is left vulnerable. The seeds of a famine are sown. Decisions, even those seemingly made in isolation or in far-off places, can reverberate around the globe. They can shape the course of history, alter the lives of millions, and leave scars that last for generations. The ripple effect of such decisions is profound and far-reaching. Decisions, even those made far away, can have profound effects. Such was the case with Winston Churchill and the Bengal famine. We'll explore more about this in the next scenes. Stay tuned as we unravel the historical context, the unfolding of the famine, and the lasting legacy of Churchill's decision. To understand the impact of Churchill's decisions, we need to step back into the world of the 1940s. It was a time of global conflict and turmoil, a world at war. The globe was divided into two major factions, with the Allies on one side and the Axis powers on the other. Among the Allies was the British Empire, ruling over a vast number of colonies, including India, and led by none other than Winston Churchill. In this era of chaos, Bengal, a province in the eastern part of British India, held strategic importance. Its location made it a critical gateway to the Southeast Asian front, a region where the Allies were fighting tooth and nail against the Japanese forces. But this was a double-edged sword. The location also made Bengal a potential target for Japanese invasion, a risk that the British were not willing to take. Churchill, known for his strategic acumen, decided to take measures to prevent the Japanese from having access to the resources of Bengal should they invade. The denial policy was thus born. The plan involved diverting resources, including food supplies, away from Bengal, effectively starving the region of its means to sustain itself. On paper, it was a strategic move designed to protect the interests of the British Empire and its war efforts. But there was more to it than just strategic considerations. Churchill's prejudices against the Indian population were well documented. He saw the Indians as a beastly people with a beastly religion, and this bias influenced his decisions. He was indifferent to the suffering that the diversion of food would cause, dismissing it as a necessary evil for the greater good of the war effort. And so, with a stroke of a pen, Bengal was deprived of its life-sustaining resources. The region, already struggling under the weight of war, was pushed to the brink of a devastating famine. The stage was set for one of the worst man-made disasters in history. Against this backdrop, Churchill made a decision that would have devastating consequences for Bengal. With the stage set, the tragedy of the Bengal famine began to unfold. In the wake of Winston Churchill's decision, the specter of famine began to loom over Bengal. The diversion of food supplies to the war effort, coupled with the destruction of local crops and boats, set in motion a series of events that would lead to one of the deadliest famines in history. The severity of the famine was unprecedented. As food supplies dwindled, prices skyrocketed. Rice, the staple food of Bengal, became a luxury few could afford. The daily struggle for survival turned into a grim reality for millions. Starvation became the norm, as the skeletal figures of men, women, and children became a common sight on the streets of Bengal. The famine didn't discriminate. It affected the rich and poor alike, urban dwellers and rural folk. But it was the poorest of the poor who bore the brunt of the disaster. The farmers, who once tilled the land and grew the crops, were now the ones most vulnerable to the famine's deadly grip. Hunger wasn't the only enemy. With malnutrition came disease. Cholera, malaria, and smallpox swept through the weakened population, claiming lives with ruthless efficiency. The social fabric of Bengal was ripped apart as desperation led to widespread theft and lawlessness. As the death toll rose, the human cost of Churchill's decision became impossible to ignore. The streets of Bengal were littered with the bodies of those who had succumbed to hunger and disease. Each death was a stark reminder of the devastating impact of a decision made thousands of miles away. Despite the mounting evidence of the disaster, the response from Churchill's government was woefully inadequate. The pleas for help were largely ignored, and the much-needed food supplies were slow to arrive. The famine, which could have been prevented, was now a full-blown humanitarian crisis. As the famine took hold, Churchill's decision began to reveal its deadly impact. The effects of Churchill's decision were not confined to the years of the famine. Indeed, the ripple effects stretched far beyond the borders of Bengal and far beyond the timeline of the Second World War. The famine left a lasting scar on the psyche of Bengal and India. It led to a profound shift in the social and economic fabric of the region. The loss of millions of lives was not just a demographic disaster, but also a cultural one. It stripped Bengal of its vibrant and diverse society, leaving behind a region struggling to rebuild and recover. The aftermath of the famine also sparked a significant political shift. The tragedy and the suffering it entailed sparked anger and resentment among the Indian populace towards British rule. This mass discontent played a crucial role in accelerating India's fight for independence, culminating in the end of British rule in India just a few years later, in 1947. Churchill's decision also left an indelible mark on his legacy. While he is often celebrated as a wartime hero, his role in the Bengal famine has been a point of controversy. Critics argue that his decision to divert food supplies away from Bengal was a clear act of racial animosity, while defenders maintain that it was a necessary wartime strategy. This debate continues to rage on, adding a layer of complexity to the legacy of one of the 20th century's most influential figures. Moreover, the Bengal famine serves as a stark reminder of the devastating consequences of political decisions. It underscores the immense power leaders hold and the responsibility they bear in wielding it. It's a sobering lesson that continues to resonate in the corridors of power across the world. The Bengal famine, a direct result of Churchill's decision, left a lasting mark on history. It's a chapter that serves as a grim reminder of the heavy toll of war and the profound impact of leadership decisions, a lesson we must never forget. So, what can we learn from the story of Churchill and the Bengal famine? The tale of Winston Churchill and the Bengal famine is not just an isolated historical event, but an enduring lesson about the power of decision-making and its far-reaching consequences. It's an essential reminder that decisions made in boardrooms and war rooms, no matter how far removed, can have a profound impact on the lives of ordinary people thousands of miles away. Let's revisit the main points of our story. The Bengal famine was not merely an unfortunate byproduct of the Second World War, but a direct result of decisions made by Winston Churchill and his war cabinet. The decision to divert food supplies away from Bengal to support the war effort, coupled with a lack of effective response when the situation escalated, led to one of the deadliest famines in history. But it's not just about the decisions that were made, it's also about the ones that weren't. The absence of a decisive intervention to alleviate the suffering, the failure to prioritize the lives of the starving, and the disregard for the human cost all contributed to the magnitude of the tragedy. The legacy of Churchill's decision is a stark reminder of the human cost of war and political decisions. It's a testament to the fact that leaders are not just strategists or figureheads, but people holding the fate of millions in their hands. Churchill's decisions, made in the heat of war, reverberated throughout Bengal, leaving a lasting impact that still resonates in the annals of history. It's a sobering thought that decisions made in the blink of an eye can echo through generations, shaping and reshaping the world as we know it. So, as we reflect on this story, let's remember the weight that each decision carries. Let's be mindful of the potential ripple effects our choices can create. Because at the end of the day, the decisions we make, no matter how small or large, can dramatically alter the course of history. Remember, the decisions we make, no matter how small or large, can dramatically alter the course of history, just as Churchill's decision did, thousands of miles away, leading to the Bengal famine.